Today we're talking about one of the stinkiest and most animalic scents in my collection. Hello, welcome back to Seldomly Often. I'm Daniel. Today we're talking fragrances, and this is a practical review of Zoologist Hyrax. These reviews are for fragrances I have a lot of experience with, multiple wears in many situations, and are meant to give you a general idea of what the fragrance feels like. As per usual, I do a lot of research before buying fragrances, but I don't really like to go into details about notes and accords, as I don't really think that they help the end user. I'd rather talk about the wear experience as a whole. Today, we're back to talking about the House of Zoologist, which is one of my favorite fragrances in my collection, and one of the most stinky and animalic scents that I own. We're talking about Zoologist Hyrax, the infamous Zoologist Hyrax, I would add. This is regarded as one of the stinkiest fragrances basically in Fragcom. Zoologist is a fun, beautiful house owned and created by Victor Wong. It's a house that is inspired by animals, the behavior of animals, and the environment of animals, and even what the animals could render as humanoid creatures. It's beautiful because the scents are very narrative, they're very communicative, they're very imaginative, and very innovative in some ways. One of the cool things about Zoologist is that Victor comes up with these interesting ideas for animals. He then selects the perfumer that he has in mind, gives them the brief, and basically lets the perfumer do their thing on their own. I really like this empowering process. There's a degree of trust, and it really lets the perfumer come up with their own idea of the animal. The fragrance that is ultimately put together is really dependent on the type of animal, their environment, and the behavior of the animal itself. Sometimes the fragrance is all about the animal per se, specifically, like in the case of Hyrax. Sometimes it's about the environment, like in the case of penguin, because penguins don't really have a specific smell. And some other times it's based on the behavior or ideal behavior of the animal or associated imagery, like in the case of rabbit, where the fragrance smells like carrot cake. Among their fragrances, you find very beautiful wearable scents, such as hummingbird, such as bee or rabbit, absolutely gorgeous. You find a little bit more experimental fragrances, such as squid, such as dodo, such as floss. And then you find the very heavy hitters of the stink realm, such as Hyrax and T-Rex. Hyrax is definitely one of the more stinky ones from the Zoologist offerings. It's based on a very stinky animal itself, the Hyrax. The Hyrax itself is a weird animal, and I actually came across this for the first time through Zoologist. And I was looking at the stinkier scents, I was looking at the more wild scents from Zoologist when I stumbled upon the reviews for Hyrax. If you go on Parfuma and start reading the comments of users, you're gonna absolutely get a kick out of that. The Hyrax itself, despite looking like a rodent, is actually more related to, surprisingly, the elephant. So it's not a rodent at all. It's actually this miniature mammal with tusks, or whatever is a remnant of a tusk. And the particular thing about the Hyrax is its behavior. Basically, this animal is known to mark its territory, let's say, in the same exact spot all the time. And I think that they have a very specific type of urine that they pee on the same rock over and over and over again. And this urine basically crystallizes into some sort of an amber and has a very particular pungent smell. This fragrance from Zoologist is the only one to employ the actual animalic raw material. Other ones that employ civet and castoreum are always a synthetic version of those, and Zoologists prize themselves to be vegan friendly. Harvesting the Heratium, or as it's known, the African stone, is completely cruelty free. You can just go there, scrape some pee off the stone, and take it home. As disgusting as it sounds, it has a very, very specific type of smell, very, very particular. How do you even build a fragrance based on a stinky raw material that is representative of the animal itself? This fragrance really employs clever tactics like introducing flowers, like introducing other base notes, which are recalling of a certain type of imagery. But we're gonna get into the scent profile after we talk about the presentation. The presentation for Zoologist is one of the strong suits of the house. I absolutely adore these bottles. Unfortunately, it appears that the bottles are going to change very, very soon. This is due to the manufacturing process or the unsustainability of the manufacturing process. Apparently it has to do with the fact that these labels have to be applied by hand, and Victor Wong is selling enough bottles that they really can't keep up with the supply. It's a little sad because the new bottles don't look as cool or as retro, but mostly it's because I won't be able to mix the new bottles in with the old ones, so I'm pretty much stuck with the ones I have have. The first thing you notice when you receive a zoologist is definitely the art that accompanies these bottles that characterizes these creatures. The art is definitely the centerpiece of zoologist presentation. I really like these drawings, specifically the Hyrx one. This little guy seems really cute and friendly. It's a nice contrast with the scent profile because, as I said, it's very stinky and animalic in a way. And yeah, I generally like all their art. Apparently, all these animal portraits are drawn by the same person, so congrats to her and her amazing job on this. The bottle itself feels good quality. The cap is heavy. It's a metal cap wrapped in this faux leather. Given Zoologist's stance on vegan product, I think I would have preferred an all-metal cap. It would have probably felt a little bit more premium. The top of the cap has a beautiful engraving of the logo. The atomizer assembly is very, very good. I did not have the issue of the gap between the sprayer and the collar. Actually, on this bottle, we have a tiny little bit of a gap, but it's barely noticeable. The atomizer sprays well, it's diffused, it's pressurized, and it's a joy to use. I'll only spray one because I've been wearing this scent all day, and it's a very intense scent. I even wore it to the office with some reservations. I'll talk about that later. Let's give it a spray. Yeah, so beautiful, pressurized, easy to aim, very diffusive, amazing to use. Wow, this scent is something else, let me tell you. Every time I spray it, it really catches me off guard. I love this so much. The bottle itself is heavy, it's well made, although not up to par with some of the best bottles I've been looking at recently, namely the Javoy. The glass is a little bit rough. It's not as transparent, it's not as smooth. You can also definitely see the molds, and for whatever reason, the corners of the bottle here are incredibly sharp, and this is true for all zoologists. The centerpiece of the presentation is definitely the art, and here the label does not disappoint. It's very beautiful, very high quality, and very well stuck on. Even the back of the label features a reflective finishing so that the back of the bottle still looks good. There's no traces of glue on the label. Overall, very, very well done. Overall, the presentation of Zoologist is absolutely amazing. You definitely get what you pay for. These feel like unique premium products, as the price would suggest. Speaking of price, Zoologist fragrances are actually quite expensive. These 60 ml bottles of Extrait de Parfum hover around $200. Some are $175, including Hyrax, while some others are like $210, including B and Tyrannosaurus Rex. So yeah, it's a very premium artisanal product, very difficult to find at discounters, and I would say that even at retail, they're worth the price because these are very, very unique and they smell unique. Okay, onto the scent profile. What does Hyrax smell like? As I mentioned, this is a very clever fragrance because it doesn't really smell like the animal per se. It has an insanely big animalic component, but the main gist of the fragrance is actually its florals. Its florals and its lightness. The first thing that hits your nose when you first spray Hyrax is the massive, and I mean absolutely massive, animalic component of this. After that, you're basically hit with the florals and this very airy type of wear experience. Now, given the fact that the animalic component is such a huge part of this fragrance, we really have to go in depth when talking about it. This animalic note is Hyraceum. It's not your usual animalic note that you find in most fragrances. It's not as common as civet or castoreum. This is a very specific, very pungent type of animalic note. If you read online, a lot of people say that Hyrax smells very poopy. It smells very much like sewage water. It's a very dirty smell with a strong fecal component to it. I have to say that personally, I'm not getting much of the fecal component in the animalic part of this fragrance. To me, Hyraceum smells a lot more pissy, a lot more pungent, and a lot more acrid. This is a very unique scent profile, and the animalic component here hits like a truck. But it hits in a way that you're not really expecting. When you first spray this, it basically feels to me like you're opening a bag of stench and you're completely overwhelmed by this very acrid, very pungent, very piercing type of smell. The animalic concoction in this fragrance really reminds me of dirty cat litter. It's very piercing. It has that very strong ammonia type of component that really almost burns your nostrils and really catches you off guard. There's something about the way this pungent and piercing stinky scent cloud combines with the florals to elevate them to new heights. The florals pick up on the ammonia and they become very balsamic and very piercing. The rose in here, which is actually the main floral, comes across as very radiant. It has a weird combination of like being minty, but at the same time it smells like gasoline vapor. It's very It's very strong, it's very overwhelming. The whole fragrance is very overwhelming. The opening is massive, it fills a room, and it's definitely not something that you would want to smell like in public. It's very, very particular. The opening of this fragrance actually lasts quite a bit. You still get the pissy component, you still get this ammonia scent cloud for about like half an hour to 45 minutes down the road. And it only goes down after that, and then the scent becomes a lot more wearable and a lot more easy to digest. As I mentioned before, the massive ammonia note here pushes the whole tonal range upwards, and the scent wears extremely light, surprisingly light. And I say surprisingly because with most stinky, most heavy scents, you're expecting a lot of bass, you're expecting a lot of like heaviness in the bottom. This one here is actually a very different type of animalic. It's piercing and pungent. Once you get to the mid dry down after about an hour and a half, the scent becomes a lot more wearable. Actually, it becomes very wearable and very beautiful. Most animalic heavy fragrances actually really shine in the dry down, and this is also true for something like Frederic Malle's The Moon, which in the opening again can be very fecal, very off-putting. Even in that case, the dry down for that fragrance, which actually happens about 6 hours down the road, it's incredibly beautiful, incredibly rich, and incredibly complex. In the deep dry down, the scent really comes alive. Those floral components that were present in the opening get surrounded by leathers, by spices, and the whole thing becomes very deep, very complex. This is not a screamer of a scent. It's actually very subtle once that massive animalic note evaporates. Once that happens, this fragrance sits on your skin as a skin scent. It's still very detectable in the air close by, but it has a very beautiful, mysterious allure. It's a scent profile that is unique, that you really don't smell anywhere else, except on maybe some other fragrances that I'll talk about soon. It took me a while to film this review because it was actually very difficult to get wears in for this fragrance. This is not something that you would necessarily want to wear in public, and unless you wait for the fragrance to hit the mid dry down, you're gonna definitely be getting some weird looks from people that pass by. So yeah, I said I wore this to the office with the caveat that I had to wait for the mid dry down because there's no way in hell that I'm wearing the opening in public and in an office setting where people know me and associate a scent to me. That being said, I was very curious about wearing the opening out and about, and I did. I sprayed this and I went outside. I would intentionally brush against people to see their reaction. Almost every person, almost every group of people that I encountered while wearing the opening would turn around as I passed and give me really weird looks. I can't really speak from experience because I've never smelled anyone wearing this thing, but given the scent profile, given the ammonia heavy opening, I would assume that wearing this in public, specifically the opening, would smell like you kind of peed yourself. And that's not necessarily an image that you want to portray, so beware. Covering practicalities for this will be brief. This is not a practical scent. This is not a versatile scent. This is a statement piece that you purchased knowing what it is, knowing that you're probably gonna barely wear this thing, and you're gonna wear it only to get a few laughs and a few kicks out of it. I would definitely not wear this to the gym or the office. I would not wear this to a party. I really can't think of any situation where this would be a good choice. Unless you're surrounded by people that know you as a weird fragrance guy or girl and accept you for that, I would definitely avoid spraying this around groups of people. Season-wise, this is actually the only category where I feel that Hyrx can be a little bit more versatile. The way this scent wears is very light again. You could probably wear this year-round and not be completely obliterated by the smell. I mean, you would be obliterated anyway because it's Hyrax, but it's not heavy, it's not cloying per se. There's nothing really that comes across as like too much or not really suited to a specific season per se. The animal component obviously is very, very strong, and probably in the heat, well, I have tried it in the heat, it evaporates even more. But that being said, if you like the animal component, if you find it intriguing, you could probably pull this off year-round. I actually really like this fragrance. As I mentioned, it's one of my favorites in my collection, and I'll never depart from this. It's so unique, it has such a specific type of smell, and every time I wear it, it really puts a smile on my face. Even just for the fact that it's so overwhelming and so different from anything else. This is usually a time where I come up with options for the fragrance, and for Hyrax, it's really difficult to come up with options because it's so unique smelling, it's so polarizing, and so intentionally stinky, and so specifically stinky. But nonetheless, I came up with 2 options that you might get a kick out of. As I mentioned in other videos, these brief descriptions of these fragrances are definitely not a review. These are just quick tidbits, and the full review of all of the fragrances that I talk about will come in due time. The first option that I came up with is actually Chanel Antaeus. And you might be really surprised about this, but actually, the way this wears, the functionality of the fragrance is actually very similar to Hyrax. Obviously, the scent profile is nothing like Hyrax because this is a Chanel first and foremost. It's designed to be a very wearable perfume, although quite strong, but the construction of the fragrance, the way it wears on you, is very similar actually. This is a light-wearing masculine floral fragrance with a huge animalic component, in this case castoreum. If you have never experienced Antaeus, you're going to be absolutely stunned by the smell of this. It doesn't really scream 80s as many people say, it doesn't really scream 90s, although this is a scent from that time. It's actually quite modern and quite timeless. It's just the way it's put together that it's so unique and really unheard of today. And again, it wears light, it wears floral, but it has this very weird, stinky, leathery component, which can be a put-off, but definitely adds a lot of character and a lot of allure to the scent. Compared to Hyrax, this is infinitely wearable. I wore this to the office many times. It's beautiful, it's commanding, it's really bossy. I really like this scent. This will stay in my collection for a while. The second and last option I'm going to talk about is a scent from Meo Fusciuni, and this one here is actually Varanasi. Meo Fusciuni is a very gentle, shy, and romantic individual. He doesn't really create stinky fragrances per se. Varanasi is kind of an oddball here. It's really mostly the opening of the Varanasi itself, not the whole scent profile, because this scent profile is characterized by the insane transition from the opening to the dry down. The opening of this fragrance is very, very animalic, very, very dirty. As the name suggests, this is inspired by the city in India. And this is a city where there's a lot of death happening. Corpses get burnt in plain sight, there are animals all over the place, and the river is not necessarily the cleanest I've ever seen. It's a very particular place, or so I've read about, and the scent really opens up with that massive, hysterically potent animalic note. The beautiful thing about this fragrance, similarly to Hyrax, is that the dry down completely transforms the fragrance as a thing. In the dry down, the scent completely transforms. It becomes beautiful, it becomes romantic, and it becomes everything that a beautiful memory of a trip to India is. This does not smell like Hyrax at all, but it still marks the same type of wearability, the same sort of vibe. I really like this, and I highly recommend you get your nose on Meo Fusciuni in general. Back to Hyrax for my final recommendations. This is a statement piece scent. You buy it as a collector piece. You buy it for the interesting aspect of it and for the fun aspect of it. A similar fragrance that is a lot more wearable is actually Hyrx, another one of my favorites of all time. These fragrances are not designed to be worn every day. These are absolutely not signature scents. You would be crazy to wear this as a signature scent. But hey, you be you. If you're that kind of person, please drop a comment down below. I really want to know more about it. Again, these are fragrances that are statement pieces. They're meant to be that thing. You have to be a fan of the house. You have to be a fan of experimental fragrances. You have to be a fan of animalics, definitely, of innovative ideas, and just be into the world of perfumery and the language of perfumery as a whole. If you're that type of individual, you're going to probably get a kick out of Hyrax and enjoy it as much as I do. Just to conclude, Hyrax is an amazing fragrance, and if you're into funky scents, be sure to get your nose on this Hall of Fame Stinky. If you like this type of content, if you like my approach to the video, feel free to subscribe. It always helps the channel and it's massively appreciated. If you want to interact with me, leave a comment, suggestion, opinion, or anything else down below. I always reply and I always keep the conversation open. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for your time. Many more videos to come, many more fun fragrances to review. See you next time and cheers.